Mr. T will return after these messages.
He is the king of the ring, but many former wrestlers say it wasn't prayers and vitamins that made Hulk Hogan a giant in the eyes of kids.
I myself personally have injected Hulk Hogan with anabolic steroids.
Did the biggest star in pro wrestling get to the top by using dangerous drugs?
You know what, Mr. Lawler? I've heard all these things you've been saying about me on television. You want to wrestle me? You want to wrestle me, man, for style? All right, fine. I'm not afraid of you, Mr. Lawler, because let me tell you something. True, I only wrestle women, but I've wrestled women that are a lot bigger and stronger than you.
We have something in common, Steve Keirn and Jimmy Hart, baby, and it is that I hate Orientals. And I know Steve Keirn hates Orientals because I know that he loves and respects his father very, very much, just like I love and respect my father very, very much. And I know also that Steve Keirn's father was a prisoner of war in Vietnam. It was in all the papers. You know it, and I know it too. So like I said before, there is no love lost between Jimmy Hart and the Orientals.
Hi, I'm the Blue Blazer, and I love to fly high. But one thing that brings me down is people who smoke. It's just no good for you. Take it from me. Stay alive, fly high, be a survivor, don't smoke.
Castro didn't do it. I've actually met with Fidel Castro. I'm the only, I believe, elected official while elected that has met with Fidel Castro. I had an hour with him. He said, I love my country, and if I would have killed Kennedy, my country would have been eliminated off the face of the earth. Do I look like someone who would do that? And I told him, no, you don't.
So, Cass, you're talking about how Doug helped get you sober and clean up. And before we talk about how hard that must have been to do, let me talk about something that's pretty easy to do and also makes a great gift. I'm talking about Ancestry DNA.
I am no longer a boy. I am Jean-Paul Levesque, the greatest professional wrestler in the world today. Remember the name, Jean-Paul Levesque.
I'll ask you the standard question. You know?
Standard question.
I think this is fake.
You think it's fake?
What's that? Is that fake? Huh? What the hell's wrong with you? That's open hand slap, huh? You think it's fake?
You people in New York City, you'd better listen up. Because you're living in a historical land. Ellis Island, the Empire State Building, the World Trade Center. When you live in a place, you have it happen to take it all for granted. Well, don't take your city for granted anymore. Go out and see your sights. Because Cactus Jack is coming to your town, boys, and the sights ain't gonna be there anymore. I'm gonna send your city crumbling down.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum. Oh, shit.
Jack, what's your very first memory of anything wrestling related? It doesn't have to be like first match you saw. Do you remember what that is?
I don't know if I have a specific moment, but like I have like when I was like a young kid, when we would go to conventions, when we would go to like horror conventions, or we would go to like whatever it was, Comic-Con, and we would meet wrestlers like Roddy Piper, for example, and you would like maybe tell me, oh, this is a wrestler, this is a big deal, and I think on some level I was confused on what wrestling was as a concept, and I think people who like, I know this from talking to, you know, my friends who don't know wrestling and are trying to understand why I like it and that sort of thing. People still who are not part of wrestling in the wrestling bubble still have pretty much the concept I think I had at the time of what it could be, because it seems like such an outlandish thing. So you're trying to explain to me that this is a guy who he gets into a ring and he basically fights, but then he also yells and insults his opponents or what have you. And this is how he dresses up. Here's a picture of what he looked like in the ring. And I'm just like, I couldn't wrap my head around it, but he's a celebrity, so let's take a picture with him. And
I think I remember telling you this may not seem like a big deal to you now, but it will later. I promise you.
Right, and it did though, because now Roddy Piper's dead, and now we have that picture, and
it was
I don't know, perspective on it is like, in a way, I wish I liked wrestling like younger or earlier. Like, you know, Phil, my co-host for the listeners, has been a fan since he was like 4 or 5 years old or something like that, and I almost wish that I really knew what wrestling was at that point in time, because I think on some level I would have liked it, because I was always into comic books and, you know, superheroes and weird colorful things and stuff. So like wrestling fits. I guess it's why I fell in love with it eventually, but it would have been something I would have liked younger, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old. And
well, the irony in all of that is that I was a wrestling fan in the 80s. I got into it in the 80s, and I was pretty intensely into it for a while, and then it wasn't for a long time. And then suddenly, probably not too long before you were born, maybe a year or so before you were born, I got back into it.
Yeah.
I stumbled across Ric Flair's autobiography, and for some reason started reading it, and I started thinking, wow, I've missed a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I remember this guy, that was a lot of fun. Started watching it again. Well, you know what, actually, it probably was after you were born, now that I think about it, but when you were very, very small, I would watch wrestling when you were in bed, and your mom did not approve in the least.
I mean, it makes sense. It's Attitude Era, so
well,
yeah.
I know there are a lot of people who don't. I mean, you know, I'm not saying anything out of school here. I'm just saying she absolutely did not like wrestling in any way, shape, or form, and strictly forbade me to introduce you to it. At that point, I was like, he's 5. I'm not going to introduce him to wrestling. There's no. It would be silly to.
Yeah.
But I kept it away from you completely, and then ironically, when you were in grade school, your best friend happened to be a wrestling fan and took you to a Raw show for his birthday, and boom.
Yeah.
I had absolutely nothing to do with it. Suddenly you were completely obsessed, nothing but wrestling. It was wrestling this, wrestling that, and I had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Right. Yeah, you're gonna have to keep repeating that a few times though. She's got to know right now. You had nothing to do with it.
I really had absolutely nothing to do with it, and so it's funny that you developed a real passion for something. I mean, I can't say that I'm passionate about wrestling in the way that you are. I'm passionate about it in that I really enjoy it, and there are certain aspects of it that we could talk for hours and hours. I get passionate about it on a daily basis. I'm not as passionate, but I mean, I was a monster kid.
Right.
I grew up with monster movies. In the early 70s, it was kind of a big thing because the old monster movies had just starting to be shown on television for the first time, and so it created a whole generation of us called monster kids. And we got the same type of, oh, that's for kids, that's stupid. When are you going to outgrow that stuff?
Sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah, doesn't it? And, you know, I'm so glad that I never outgrew that stuff. I'm still into monster movies. I'm still into all that stuff. And, I mean, how many times has somebody, either well-intentioned or not, said to you, Jack, you know wrestling's fake, don't you? Over under 50 times, 100 times?
Oh, no, I would say I would give it several hundred times because I think there's, I mean, people who find out that I like wrestling and who maybe, I mean, they know me well enough to like, you know, think they're breaking some kind of news to me that maybe wrestling is fake and I didn't know. They exclusively will every single time. Actually, recently there was a time where I had to tell one of my friends who doesn't know wrestling that wrestling is fake. So I felt bad about that because they just didn't know anything about wrestling. And when I told her that wrestling is scripted, she had the same reaction I did as a kid when I found out. And I was apparently, you know, I felt like I was in the other place. But basically, every time that I would have a conversation with anybody, and I mentioned wrestling, specifically when I was a kid, but it doesn't happen as much anymore because I think I'm more like open about it and like proud about it. Like I'll mention it, and I'll be more likely to talk about it and say this is the thing I like about it. So maybe they're more likely to not want to like, you know, condescend to me or something. But it was every time that I would bring up wrestling. It was, oh, but isn't that the fake thing? Do you know it's fake? Which is a great one. No, I don't. I have no idea. But the main problem with the whole fake discussion is like that I don't know where people who feel the need to expose the fact that it's fake to other people, what they think the end goal is. Like, am I shocked now? And if I am shocked, does that make me stop liking it? Am I going to change my mind because it's as scripted as a movie is, or as scripted as a TV show, any other TV show? It airs on TV. It's as scripted as any other TV show. It's as scripted as America's Got Talent. Probably less scripted than America's Got Talent. So I'm not going to, even if you're breaking this news for the first time, which I think as a wrestling fan, it's pretty hard to believe that you're telling me this for the first time, that wrestling's fake, that I don't know this. But if this is the first time I'm hearing it, why would this change my opinion on it? Also, why does that make it like a kid thing too? Because that's always the thing paired with it, is it's fake, and then also because you like it, it's childish, or because you like it, it's in some way or another, it's stupid. And where's the connection between these things? So because you like movies, then you also must be a kid. I'm not really sure where that attaches. Am I supposed to only like real things, like documentaries or something?
Yeah. You never have that conversation about plays, do you? I mean,
right.
Do you say, oh, you know what? I really should tell you this to save some embarrassment, but that Romeo and Juliet, Juliet didn't really take poison. She didn't really die. That's fake. Those weren't real swords. How fucking stupid do people think you... I mean, it's condescending to such a level that the person who thinks they're telling you that wrestling's fake, what must they think of you to tell you that?
Right.
They must think that you're absolutely a potato head, that there's absolutely no cognitive thought going on there. Oh, it's fake. And then what? Like you said, what's the motivation? Do they want you to stop watching it? Why?
I think maybe on some level. Yeah. Because they have to think you're, first of all, because they think wrestling is probably a stupid thing, they have to think you're stupid enough to watch wrestling, and then they have to think you're stupid enough to also not know the most basic part of wrestling, which is the fact that it's scripted. So there's it's a double whammy. So you must be the stupidest person on earth to this, not at all hypothetical person who I've met a million times.
And will continue to.
Probably.
It's a lifelong thing, Jack. You're going to have people telling you, oh well, so what? My fourth grade teacher, I was an A student. I mean, I was Mr. Brainiac. And,
okay, all right, yeah.
And in fourth grade, I bring my report card home, which was always just, you got all straight A's. Fantastic. And I did, but in the little box for remarks, my fourth grade teacher said, Lee needs to find something besides monsters to be interested in.
Right.
The implication was that it's an unhealthy. My mom and dad, I mean, they certainly weren't pushing me into doing anything, but they looked at that and they were like, what is she talking about? You get straight A's. Right, that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, thank you. Thanks, Dad.
Well, that's the thing, too, because it's... You're
getting straight A's. What is she talking about?
Yeah, I mean, because she's literally saying he should find something else. Like, you have nothing else that you are interested in or know anything about. But then here's the report card that says that there are several other things you know things about. So why is it necessary to say? Yeah.
What could I do if I dropped the monsters? I would get what? A pluses?
Maybe.
Is that even possible? What? It's just so silly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure that, or I would guess that you were met with a lot of that in school and with peers. I mean, I think there's been a shift, at least in how wrestling is seen, your generation to my generation.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more acceptance of it now. At least it's so big and it's on a huge worldwide scale, so most people know about it. Like when I was growing up, I think my first memory of anything, or my first realization that there was something called wrestling was, I mean, I knew about it. In the 70s, it wasn't on television, really. This is pre-WWF even.
Right.
So what was on TV seemed kind of like low class. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it kind of was.
It was kind of, but it was shot on cheap video. The sets looked cheap. It looked a little bit more like, it didn't look refined, like the stuff that we watch on TV. So I had no interest. But in 8th or 9th grade, I had a friend. His name was Robert Avila. He sadly passed away a couple years after graduation. He was morbidly obese, really sweetheart of a guy. We weren't friends yet. We became good friends later. But he was morbidly obese. And people called, his last name was Avila. So people picked on him and called him Abdullah.
Right.
After Abdullah the Butcher, which I didn't know, but then I made the connection. I was like, oh, there's a fat guy with dark skin who's a wrestler.
Right.
They're making, okay, he's a fat guy with dark skin. Okay, get it. So that was the first time I ever, I think, associated anything with wrestling. It wasn't very positive.
It's weird because, in this one case, you have the bullies actually making the wrestling references. So the tables are kind of flipped here. You would think they'd be bullying him for that.
Right?
That's because the weird thing about wrestling is it goes through phases of when it's mainstream in a way and when it's whether it's accepted or whether what type of person likes it or what have you. And it's unlike a lot of other things, I think, in that where it's you had in the early days of wrestling, it was kind of like a primitive sport where, I mean, I think a lot of people probably still didn't know it was fake, and it wasn't really what the performance that it is today. They had a whole different standard for what wrestling matches should be, that sort of thing. And it wasn't on TV. But then when Hulk Hogan got popular, all of a sudden it's the mainstream thing. And it probably still wasn't seen as necessarily the coolest thing, but you had pretty cool celebrities in it, people who were considered cool. It was on NBC. It was on MTV, or maybe not MTV, but I think it was on MTV. And it was a big deal.
MTV was a big part of it. Yeah, that was the lead up to WrestleMania was on MTV.
That's right. And I think they did a later show, one of the main event or one of those shows on there too. But then it dipped again for a while. It got really unpopular in the early 90s, and then it became huge again with the Attitude Era, and all of a sudden it was the cool kids who liked it, basically. Like, it was like everybody was talking about the pay-per-view the next day, from what I hear from people who were around at the time. And, you know, from the mainstream publicity it got. And it had a Super Bowl commercial for WWF, and there was all the wrestlers run Saturday Night Live and were doing commercials. Then it dipped again for whatever reason. John Cena kind of killed it, but it dipped for a while there. And then I guess you could say there was some sort of, it wasn't nearly as big as the first two booms, but there was some sort of increase in popularity maybe 5-ish years ago, where, like, for whatever reason, maybe it's The Rock getting mainstream and John Cena getting mainstream, but it seemed like more people at least knew about wrestling, had heard of some things about wrestling. It was getting more promotion. I was seeing Subway ads for Raw and things like that. It was different in some way. And it's not, it'll be a while. It might happen again where there's another boom, but it'll be a while before it's really popular. But it still felt like it was a little bit of an increase there. And it seems like it was somewhere around there. And I bet it was because of The Rock and because of John Cena, because everybody knows who they are. And they're the definition of a household name now, where it's like, if you don't know who they are and also think they're pretty cool, then you're not, on the same wavelength as the rest of us. So the mainstream, like, acceptance of them, I think, has changed the, like, wrestling is fake discussion. For whatever reason, I don't get that anymore. People don't say that to me. In the last couple of years, I've almost not at all gotten that. And the most I've gotten is somebody almost trying to be nice or trying to, because they actually genuinely don't know. They'll be like, wait, but is it fake though? Like, they'll ask me like that instead of, oh, but it's fake, or do you know it's fake? It's a different discussion. And I don't know, there's like more respect around it in a weird way. I don't know if people actually think of it with more, like it's a legitimate thing, but it definitely feels like the conversation's different. And I don't know why, really. It's probably John Cena.
You've grown up in the internet age, so you wouldn't notice. I mean, you wouldn't know what it was like before the internet age, but now that there's open access to everything, do people just sort of take it for granted that everybody knows about everything, or they don't? Like, when I was younger, even I got really into wrestling again in the 80s, right before WrestleMania. Somehow I got involved in that whole MTV build-up, and
before it was cool.
It was really interesting. Yeah. Well, it was, I mean, I guess. I mean, before it was. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that's when I got involved in it. That's when it caught my attention. And at that point, there was still, you could pretend kayfabe for fun, which is what I did. And it drove my then girlfriend crazy, because I would be telling her, no, Hulk Hogan actually did this.
Right.
She's like, yesterday you explained how this whole thing was set up, and now you're saying it's actually real?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I still do this now, for the record. Yeah.
But you could still, again, there's no internet. There was really not much televised wrestling. There were, you could track down a magazine. There might have been 2 magazines on the newsstand, but really that's it. It wasn't like 24/7 access to information about it. So, and yeah, people did used to think it was real. That's how it got over. I mean, it wasn't intended to be theater from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'm sure even in the early 80s, maybe beyond that, you'd have people, I don't want to single out the South, but
the South.
I'm going to anyway.
Yep.
People in the South. Okay, let's say, to be fair, the Mid-South.
Oh, yeah.
Too. I'm sure there are people who lived their lives and died thinking the whole thing was real and cursing the heels.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's stories of people like pulling knives on, like little old ladies pulling knives on heels. Yeah. It's like, they think it's real.
Right.
So,
and I wish there was more of that today.
It's hard to believe.
Honest. Yeah.
It's hard to believe that could happen today, but I suppose there are pockets of, because it's so easy to find out that it's quote unquote not real.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the 80s, it would have been hard. You had to go out of your way to find out what the deal was. When 2020 did that whole thing with John Stossel, when Dr. D smacks him upside the head, that was a big deal. Right. I watched that the evening it premiered. That was a big deal. Suddenly it was like, what the fuck's going on? I thought it was fake.
Right.
He just slapped him. He just knocked the crap out of this guy. It's not fake. And that was, to me, that's thrilling. That's what's interesting about it. And when I do get passionate about certain things about wrestling, that's the kind of stuff. Like the mass transit incident. Not that I want to see anybody get hurt, but I'm endlessly fascinated by that, because there's so many layers of realness to that it's so fascinating. And yet that's the kind of stuff that I remember seeing back in the 80s. I remember seeing some clip on, it wasn't the WWF, it was whatever the other one was.
In NWA. Yeah.
It could have been, I'm thinking Gordon Soley was probably
probably
I can
AWA.
hear his voice.
Yeah.
Okay, so but I can just hear his voice, and he was doing it was a recap of something that happened at a house show or some show the other night, and it was somebody who threw, now of course I know it was flash paper, But the idea was that he lit his eyes on fire.
Oh, right, yeah.
I was fascinated by that at the time. And nobody could tell me, oh, it's fake.
Right. Yeah, what's weird is they still use the flash paper thing. I don't know if you saw Alexa Bliss do that to Randy Orton a few weeks ago, but it's still a thing. You would think, it was probably one of the more less believable aspects of wrestling, and yet it's one that they continue. But yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, when we interviewed Mikey Whipwreck a few weeks ago on Fight Guys.
Great interview, by the way.
Thank you. What did you think about his take on New Jack? Because I asked him about New Jack, and he said, as far as the mass transit incident, which he was there for, that he was like, yeah, it's fucked up, but like, I don't know the whole story, and I like New Jack, so, whatever. I was a little put off by that.
I think it was diplomatic. I mean, you have to keep in mind that, I know he's not an active wrestler now, but he's still in the business to some degree, right? Yeah. And you don't want to burn bridges. And also, I would imagine, not being a wrestler, but I would imagine that there's a certain amount of what soldiers have. They would go through combat and do this day in, day out, whatever. And yeah, even if you find out that one of the guys in your platoon's a bad guy, he's still in your platoon, and your tendency is to maybe, if it comes down to defending New Jack or some interviewer, who's of course he's going to take a side of his friend.
Right. Right.
I don't think he said anything that was. I remember him saying that. I don't think it didn't feel like it was out of line to me, or like he was making excuses. It felt more like, there are people, Jerry Lewis, comedian. Everybody in show business has a Jerry Lewis is a prick story. Everybody.
right, yeah.
Everybody. But you'll find one person who's like, well, he was always nice to me. And yeah, of course. Corey Feldman says, well, Michael Jackson didn't rape me. Well, okay, he didn't rape everybody.
Yeah.
He didn't rape everybody. He didn't have time to rape everybody.
That's true.
No offense, Corey. It's just he was too high profile anyway.
He also had plenty, so.
Right. Yeah, but it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. It put me off though, because like we had just asked him about the Goldberg Undertaker story where they were talking about how wrestlers are soft today. Young wrestlers are like, not as tough as the old wrestlers. And like he agreed with that for the most part. Like he was saying like, people don't pay their dues like they used to. And then he goes into, I love New Jack, and I'm not going to condemn the mass transit incident. Seemed a little weird to me. It felt like almost he was condoning a degree of, I think he even said at the time, I think the kid deserved it a little bit or something. He said something like along the lines of like, I think the kid shouldn't have gotten in there or something. And that's true. He shouldn't have gotten in there. But the order of things he said was felt a little bit fucked up to me.
Well, my understanding is that the kid got a lot of backstage heat.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly what he said or did. I would never say, oh yeah, I think the kid deserved getting almost, bleeding to death almost. But I can understand saying, yeah, he should have gotten slapped down a little bit because that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I can maybe see excusing New Jack up to the point where he cut him too deep and saying, okay, everything else is fine. He cut him too deep.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Which wouldn't make New Jack necessarily an evil person if that's the case, knowing what we know about his other quote unquote feuds with people or attempted murders of people. I can see defending a friend like that, and especially if he really was a friend. Mm-hmm. If maybe he had Mikey's back, you never really know. So and again, it's like deconstructing the whole mass transit incident. I can see that if he hadn't cut him so deep, it really wouldn't have been a story, right? That's what it comes down to. It wasn't that he was beating the shit out of the kid. Nobody cared about that. Right. That happens all the time.
Yeah,
it's a squash. So, but if he had just given him some color the way you normally do it, it wouldn't have been a story, right?
Well, the thing about that is like, I think he continued to dig himself a hole a little bit after that, because he got on the mic and he was like, I want to kill that kid or whatever. He said, I forget what he said exactly, but something along the lines of, I'm going to kill him. I want to kill him.
But that's in character. That's in character also, not knowing the extent of the kid's injuries too.
That's what I was going to say though, is that's how people defend it, is that, that was in character. So you can't really count that as part of the whole incident. He wasn't actually trying to kill him, but he was a good guy at the time who was just straight up babyface who would always come to the defense of other babyfaces like Tommy Dreamer and that sort of thing. So that's not a character who would get on the mic and say, I'm going to kill that kid for getting in the ring, I believe that based on his other actions, his other actual attempted murders that he has now, admitted were attempted murders in interviews and stuff, that I think that probably was too. Maybe he didn't want to kill him. Maybe he just really wanted to, hospitalize him, very badly injure him.
Yeah.
And that's still...
He was indifferent to it. Yeah.
Right. If he had died, I don't think New Jack would have cared. And that's just as bad, so...
Watching the Vic Grimes incident,
right?
There's no way he shouldn't be in jail for that.
Right.
It just, Although, I mean, I guess you can argue that there were two performers, and so Grimes was partially responsible for not. But
for missing the tables.
He tased the guy.
Yeah.
He tased the guy so he couldn't even move. He couldn't jump.
Yeah.
That's the part that keeps getting lost in the story. Is that like, New Jack says, well, Vic was supposed to jump and then he chickened out and so I pushed him. Like, no, you tased him.
Right.
So he was paralyzed. He tried to murder the guy. I'm
He
sorry,
did.
New Jack, if you're listening to this, but
I hope he's not listening to this. It's yeah, and then there was the other, the Gypsy Joe incident as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So like that one, like he was never going to successfully kill him in that one. That one was probably the furthest from it, but he beat him so badly and said during the match. I mean, that could have also been a character. I don't know if the context of what his character was at that point in time, but like he was beating the guy and he was saying to the crowd, I'm going to kill him. I think that's one of the cases where he said later, I wanted to kill him or something along those lines. And I don't know how much when he's in interviews, I don't know how much he's being honest or how much he's still kind of trying to play up that he's a gangster or something. That seemed like an incident as well where he was taking a guy who that actually was an experienced wrestler, but he was an old, fragile man and taking that opportunity to like at least hospitalize him, which he did. And I think later Gypsy Joe had some sort of stroke or heart attack and died, right? So I don't think those are unrelated. So
nobody should have booked that match.
Right.
Let's be honest. But
and nobody should have booked Mass Transit. Paul Heyman shouldn't have booked Mass Transit that night either. But it's most wrestlers are supposed to protect other wrestlers, even if they're inexperienced or whatever. So shooting on anybody is inexcusable unless it's retaliation for somebody them shooting on you first or something like that. Like even like William Regal trying to embarrass Goldberg in that match. I thought it was hilarious because Goldberg sucks, and I'd like to see somebody show him how to wrestle, but he's a new guy who they're trying to push, and Regal just decides, you know what? No, I'm going to no-sell all his moves, and I'm just going to try to roll him up into a bunch of submissions and make him look like shit. And then so they fired Regal for that, which I think is justified because that's not how you're supposed to conduct yourself, punching him for real in the face. So it's like at that point, even like as simple as punching somebody for real in a wrestling match, which is pretty simple, and I think a lot of wrestlers do that to just show they're tough or whatever in the ring. That should only ever happen if they punched you first for real. I don't understand where that comes from either. You're just assaulting them, like just because it's in the context of a fake fighting deal doesn't mean real fight. It's not real fighting,
Right. I guess I would hazard a guess that, again, not having done this, but I would guess that wrestling in match after match, there's so much precision involved, and there's so many opportunities where you could err and hurt somebody or get hurt. You have to have the trust between the two performers. And I imagine at a certain point, if you feel like the other person isn't, for whatever reason, like is shooting on you or for whatever, I can maybe see letting the emotions get to me and feel like, well, fuck this. If he's going to hit me, I'm really going to hit him. I sort of get that, But with the mass transit thing, what I can't stop thinking about is how many times did they get away with it? Right? If Heyman was so reckless, or whoever, there were a lot of people who were very reckless that night. If they were always that reckless, then they probably got away with it a lot of times.
Yeah.
Where, something happened that could have been really, really bad, but because of luck, didn't happen.
Yeah. There was that one incident, too, where I think it was Terry Funk or Mick Foley or somebody threw a fireball, or I think it was not actually flash paper this time. I think it was an actual fireball of some kind. And part of it, like some of the flame hit somebody in the crowd. And they successfully sued ECW for a lot of money. But they had been like a super fan, and somebody else, I think, was at ringside, and I think Mick Foley says this in one of his books, somebody else was at ringside and also got hit with some of the flame and was like, oh, that was awesome. It was like brushing ashes off of themselves. So it's like there's so many of those things that could be could be considered negligence by a corporation like that, by WWE even. I mean, WWE has killed and severely injured plenty of people who work for them. So like, there's got to be situations where just the person's been like, yeah, no, this is so cool. I just got several of my teeth knocked out because I was in the front row and somebody just decided to punch me. But hey, it's worth it though because it was a great match and I'm front row. That's the ECW style, I think, of fan.
Sure. Well, then what happens is they go home and they tell their friend, who tells another friend who happens to have a lawyer in the family, and is like, oh, you know what? There's a lawsuit in this, whereas they might not have even thought about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Prior to.
Yeah. The other thing, actually, I want to ask you because since you've been a fan since the 80s, and I've only watched that stuff recently, the stuff from through the 80s and through 90s and even early 2000s, I hadn't watched, obviously live. When you look at like the quality of the show at the time and then compare it to like the way it is now, what how do you see it? Which one's better?
I think they're so different.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's kind of like watching. If you go to YouTube and look at an NFL game from the 70s, say,
Yep.
it's shot totally different. I mean, they use different cameras, different angles. It's just a whole different thing. Now they've got drones, so that they have basically any portion of the field can be covered at any moment. So probably just simpler, Probably the production value of WWF was always way higher than the other Southern organizations, whatever. The thing about the celebrities, the WrestleMania, is that it isn't like suddenly they became mainstream. These were basically grade D level celebrities.
Yeah.
Vince took whatever he could get. Just any rub from celebrity was enough for him.
Yeah.
So if you look back at those early WrestleManias and they've got, okay, Muhammad Ali was a big star, obviously.
Yeah.
But then you've got Liberace, who was a big star in the 60s, but by this point he was just a complete laughing stock. It wasn't like he brought eyes to the matches. And then you had like Cy Sperling, the Hair Club for Men guy, a few years later.
Right.
But still, it's like, that's what Vince thinks of celebrity as, basically anybody that's on TV, which I guess to a degree is what we're living in now. I mean, where fucking the My Pillow guy is a celebrity. We know the guy's name, and because he's on TV.
I honestly could not tell you his last name. I've been calling him Mike Pillow this whole time. What is his
Mike
last?
Lindell.
Lindell, that's right.
Soon to be inmate number 46325.
Yep, for sure.
That never happens. But,
at least he's going to lose all his fortune. But
yeah. But there was the MTV angle, and that was not Vince's idea at all. That totally was handed to him by Cyndi Lauper's boyfriend at the time,
right?
Who was also her manager.
Yeah.
And he was a big wrestling fan, and he called up Captain Lou Albano, who was a heel manager at the time, and said, "Could you be in this video?" He's like, "Okay," and he did. And so then suddenly it's like, and that was a huge video too. It was like the #1 video on MTV for a long time. And suddenly it's all these people are like, "Who's that guy?" And then Vince is like, "Oh." The MTV association kind of catapulted them into the next level. I was in Los Angeles when the first WrestleMania was on, and I had just moved out there, and I kept seeing these commercials for WrestleMania. Oh, it's going to be so great. And finally, tickets are on sale tomorrow at 7 a.m. And it said New York. Where was the first one? Where was the first one held?
First one was MSG.
First one.
I think you're thinking
MSG.
The second, because the second one they had the 3 locations. One of them was LA.
Right, well, what happened? This was the first one, and it said like tickets are going on sale tomorrow for New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, maybe, or Detroit or whatever. And I thought, oh, they're going to have stadiums in all 3 places, and great. So I was working with a woman whose husband was a wrestling fan, and he was off that day, I guess, or whatever. And so he was going to call in and get us tickets. Very excited, WrestleMania tickets. And then he calls back and says, it's actually in New York. It's not in Los Angeles. They're selling tickets to go sit in the forum and watch it on a screen, on a pay-per-view screen.
Right.
For like $100.
Jeez.
Yeah, no,
What?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Oh,
so
man.
I didn't get to see the first WrestleMania.
Oh, yeah. At the time, you couldn't have gotten it off of the Pirate Bay.
No, you had to wait. You had to wait until it wasn't too long, I think, before they put the tape out.
Right.
It seemed like they capitalized on that pretty quickly.
Yeah, they had to. I was gonna say if you'd waited 1 year, you would have gotten to see 1/3 of WrestleMania 2 in Los Angeles, because they did exactly what you thought they were gonna do. They had the triple.
That's right.
Yeah, and let's see, you would have gotten. Oh, okay. So you would have gotten the Hogan Bundy match. There you go, inside a cage.
Oh man.
Which was, terrible match, but it was the official main event, so it works. In Chicago, you would have gotten Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake versus the Bulldogs as the main event. So.
Ooh.
And New York got the Battle Royal with Andre and the football players. So.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And there was the Piper Mr. T
King
boxing
Kong Bundy. I'll never understand what happened to King Kong Bundy.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, and I don't think he ever understood either what happened. I read an interview with him, and he was like, they just stopped calling me.
Yeah. Yeah.
They literally just stopped calling me. He main evented WrestleMania 2.
Yeah.
Right? And then I met him at a comic convention and took a photo with him. And he puts his arm around me, and we look at the guy taking the picture, and he says, "Okay, smile and say pussy." So if you see the photo of me,
are you
mid-word?
mid-word?
And me are both saying pussy.
Nice. That's great. Yeah. I was, I think I was there, right? I was in the background of that.
It's possible. I kind of don't remember.
Yeah.
Honestly, I remember certainly meeting Piper.
Right.
With you. He was so wonderful. I mean, he really was just such a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And he got down on your level. You were, I think, 5, and he got down on his squatted, looked right into your eyes, and said, "Jack, you got God dust in your eyes." It melted my heart. I mean, it was so. Even as an atheist, I understand what that means.
Sure.
It's just a really nice thing to say.
Do you? Because when I think about it, I still don't really know what God dust is. Would it be like a reflection of like stardust, or I'm confused where that comes from.
Well, don't confuse it with angel dust.
Oh, okay.
That's more of a Jeff Hardy thing.
Yeah.
But I think what he's saying is that God or the universe or whatever is beauty, and you can see reflections of God in all things that are beautiful, like flowers or the smile of a little puppy dog's face, or if you're King Kong Bundy, then pussy. Just all the beautiful things, I think that's what he was saying, is that there's God in your eyes.
Right.
Whatever he meant specifically, it was a nice thing. And
the sentiment,
yeah,
that's true. Yeah, Roddy Piper is interesting because, so would you consider him still your favorite of all time?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
No question.
Because even when I watch his old stuff from WWF now, I still love it, and his promos are incredible, and his matches were actually, I think his match quality very underrated. The match with Bret Hart at WrestleMania was really great. So I absolutely that era. But did you ever watch him in WCW? Because he went way downhill as soon as he jumped ship.
Yeah, I've only watched some of that after he did They Live, right? And then he came back.
Yeah, well, he went back to WWE at that point and fought Goldust at WrestleMania, which in my memory, and even watching it is pretty fun to watch. Is like a weird match where they used the OJ chase footage to show him chasing him on the freeway. I don't know why they couldn't have just taken footage of 2 other cars, but maybe that was the joke. I'm not sure, but still, even watching it now, that match is pretty great to watch. Piper getting hit, like just rammed with Goldust's gold limo, but I watched it chronologically because I've been recently rewatching the Attitude Era, and at that one, the storyline leading up to it was pretty fucked up because it was just that Roddy Piper was basically going up to Goldust and saying, "You're gay, and because you're gay, you have no place in wrestling, and I am basically going to show you that I'm a real man and that I'm more manly than you, and so we should fight in a street fight so that I can not only beat you but like emasculate you." And then the match ends up with him ripping off Goldust's jumpsuit to reveal that he's wearing like women's underwear. So it's a whole thing.
I do remember that. To be fair, didn't they dance around? They never actually said gay or homosexual or anything, right? Didn't they? It's obviously more than implied, but I think they were very careful in the way that they never said that Goldust had Tourette's.
Right.
They just said he had a condition, right?
They really did.
Because people would get upset. Tourette's people. By the time they eventually spit the words out, they'd be like, but you motherfucker.
No, they get really upset.
Pretty entertaining.
They get upset a lot
right.
faster. More often.
They're upset when they're not upset.
Exactly.
They say motherfucker when they're not upset. So what?
Right. See, here's the thing. I always thought that was the case too, that they were dancing around, and they did their best to not. I don't think they ever said the word gay, unless I'm mistaken, but I think they did worse. Because I remember Jerry Lawler. I watched a promo where he comes out, and his whole promo was. He comes out, takes the mic, and he just says to Goldust, "Hey, aren't you, a little, And Goldust is like, "What are you trying to say?" And he goes, "Aren't you a little queer?" And that was the promo. And
I didn't see that.
And it didn't even get a boo. It got a cheer from the crowd. And the commentator, like JR, is just going, "Oh, did he really say that?" Not like, "Oh my God, he's a heel." Just like, "Whoa, he said a thing," It wasn't even considered like the lowest heel move. It was like, everybody's just like, yeah, isn't he? And I'm pretty sure that Roddy Piper said the same thing during that storyline. Something along those lines. But he at least implied it, as heavily as he could. And of course there's the women's underwear thing, but they tried to backtrack it as much as possible because I think there was they were threatened with some sort of organization, gay rights organization at the time, threatened them with they were like, this character is offensive and you need to tone it down. And by the way, this is a trivia question at my at the trivia tournament, was which major wrestling company has not been sued by gay rights organizations? And the answer was WWE, because WCW and TNA have both been sued by GLAAD.
Oh, interesting.
WWE has been threatened with a lawsuit, never actually officially sued. That was the trick question.
Undefeated.
Yeah. Well, they're defeated in a lot of other lawsuits, but but yeah, I think they were like basically threatened, and they were like, you need to tone down the character. So their version of toning down the character was not, oh, well, yeah, he's gay, but let's make it an empowering character, because, you know, it was the 90s. So the version of that was, oh, next week he's going to come out and reveal actually he has a wife and he's completely, totally straight. And all that we've implied over the last few years is just a lie and not part of his character. So just forget that, please. And then they just lean back into it later. Like, they just were just like, I guess I don't know. They're not currently threatening us with any more legal action. We could just make him seem really overly, you know, homoerotic again. We could just totally do that. And they just did it again. And then I don't know what happened, but at some point along the line, they were like, let's maybe not do this. And then they had him do the Tourette's gimmick, which was another trivia question on the trivia tournament, was what was the other effect? At something along the lines of what was the other effect of that? It turned him straight as well, officially. Like, he comes out and was like, I'm straight. So, which might have been the Tourette's, I guess. He might not have actually been. Anyway, I don't know where. That led to, because after that match, I think that was his contract was up or something, and he left and went to WCW, and then got even worse, because I think he realized, I think he turned the sort of like homophobia into his gimmick. So he decides to come out at every promo where, no matter who he's fighting, he has to just all but say that his opponent is actually gay, or that if he's got two enemies, that they're actually like sucking each other off backstage. And he just like says it in every promo. He's like, hey, I heard Hogan and Bischoff, they share a dressing room. I wonder what they're doing out there in their dressing room, you know? And just all but, actually, he would do all but say they were gay, and then he would say they're gay. So that was his gimmick. And it was coupled with just the worst matches you ever have seen. I don't know what happened, because he actually was a really good wrestler. I think he had the hip injuries, but he had like what are widely considered the worst matches in WCW are like him versus Hogan, and I think him versus Savage was also like a notoriously bad one. So it just, it fell apart very fast, and they still pushed him as like a main face for a long time. He was still popular though with the crowd, because again, it was the 90s, and they're going to cheer I guess just the gay insults is what they'll cheer.
Yeah.
So it worked. I'll give him credit.
Here's one thing I want to say that really impressed me when you and I were going to shows.
Yeah.
In my day, and even past my day, I think the stereotypes, ethnic stereotypes, racial stereotypes were such a part of wrestling that when we were at a show and Sonny Kiss appeared. Yeah. Sonny Kiss is a person whose persona is, I don't know that he says he's gay or whatever, but flamboyant, wears hot pants, makeup. It's very, it's flouncy, and he's a face. Mm-hmm. And that impressed the hell out of me. And I didn't hear a single homophobic remark from anybody in the crowd. And that's not to say that people weren't thinking it, but especially, you got people at these shows yelling out stuff, and it's all fun, and you try to yell, especially at the heels. Mm-hmm. But the fact that nobody was doing that just impressed the heck out of me, because in the 80s and the 90s, under Vince, that character would be a heel. Yeah. And we would be taunting him. We would be encouraged to make homophobic remarks from the audience. That's how he would play it. So I don't know if that means there's a big shift in things suddenly, or if it means I haven't been paying attention, and so there has been a gradual shift, and now we're at this point. What do you think? I mean, do you notice? You must, if you're watching, say, the Attitude Era, you must notice a big difference in what's said and what's implied, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not just by the wrestlers, but yeah, I guess that's what you mean here. The fans and the wrestlers are equally. I guess it's just a product in general of like the culture has changed a lot in the last 20 years, but wrestling has always been supposed to be like the quote unquote lowbrow form of entertainment, and so it attracts the quote unquote lower class people. That's the idea. So of course you're going to see a lot of homophobia and racism and sexism from the crowd. That's the stereotype, I guess, and that was very true until recently. But I think part of it is maybe just the crowds that we see at a lot of these New York indie shows. A big portion of them are non-white. A lot more women coming to shows these days. It's in general shifting demographic, I think, in wrestling fans. I mean, it's probably younger and younger wrestling fans as well, not just kids, but like we're seeing a lot of people in their 20s and 30s seeing shows, where usually at a small indie show you might just see people in their 60s or whatever. I feel like the demographic has changed in a lot of ways, so that's part of it. But yeah, like you said, the Attitude Era. I was watching a show recently, I think it was 98, and DX was in the ring doing one of their, shticks, and they literally, like, actively, the camera cut to a sign in the crowd that the sign was, "I don't mind coloreds, but I hate queers." And
okay,
there's no context for that in which, like, in wrestling that would, like, make sense with, like, the storyline or something. So he just wanted to say that. He wanted everybody to know. Yeah, why wouldn't they take that sign on his way in? I'm not sure, but they've inspected my signs before when I've brought Go Seth Rollins signs, so I don't know.
Well, can you bring you can bring a Sharpie in, right, in a sign, and then write it in your seat? Can you? I would imagine that's what happens when.
A lot of people do that for specifically when they want to, like, self-promote or something, because they were not going to let you in with a sign that says "Follow me on Instagram." They usually confiscate them if it comes up on TV, though. But so they might have taken that one. But I gotta, because it looked like it was like a young person too. It was not like some redneck wearing a Confederate flag shirt just wandered into this show and just wanted to let you know that he hates queers. But it was some just, like, person my age who was just hanging out with his, like, frat boy friends, and they were just like, "Yeah, I love wearing a Stone Cold shirt or something." I don't know. I mean, in general, obviously just society and the way we talk and stuff is way different than it used to be. But, like, in wrestling, I think it's more clear because that's always been, like, the redneck sport. It's still looked at by the outside that way, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that since we're in New York, that's probably giving me a skewed. But then, by the same token, I'm sure that if I were to go to a Jets game, I would hear every racial epithet that I would hear at a Falcons game.
Well, that's Jersey, though.
Oh, that's true. Good point. Good point. No, New York Jets. New York.
No, New York.
Play in Jersey. Right. They just train in Jersey and live in Jersey.
Yeah,
but
I wonder how many people actually go to, because I've been to that arena I went to that arena for WrestleMania, the arena that what is it called now, MetLife, and it took me so long to get. I mean, granted I took public transport, but I heard from some of my friends who took cars there that it still took a long time to get there. So how many people from New York are actually going to see the Jets? It's probably mostly people from New Jersey because it's close,
Yeah.
So definitely Jersey team. Anyway,
I love whenever I see a friend of mine wearing a Giants cap or a Jets cap. Or Giants, actually. I don't have any problem with the Jets, but the point is, oh, are you from Jersey? And I go, what?
That's awesome.
You're wearing a Giants cap. You must be from Jersey, right?
That's great. Yeah. Oh yeah, I want to see what the crowd is like when Sonny Kiss wrestles in, like, Kentucky. Like, how does that? Right. Does he wrestle in Kentucky? I mean, I honestly, if I were Sonny Kiss, I'd probably just straight up avoid taking bookings in a place like that. Because we were saying there's even still some fans today who are as passionate as those little old ladies who would try to stab wrestlers. There are still a couple of them who exist. We see fans hop the guardrail, and, like, somebody tried to stab Dean Ambrose a couple years ago. There's the person who threw the Money in the Bank at Roman Reigns' head.
Right.
There's people who are still these crazy. There was the guy who tried to kidnap Sonya Deville a couple months ago.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
Oh, really? Yeah, it was this guy. It was like there was a million, like, social media threats apparently that just nobody took seriously. That, like, she reported where a guy was threatening to come to her house and kidnap her, and I think she reported them, and it was just kind of like, okay, yeah, you're a celebrity, you get these things all the time, but then he was arrested right outside her house, like he had been to her house, and she, I guess, was inside. I don't think he made it to the inside the house, but he made it up to the door so that they made eye contact and saw each other, and she was, like, fully traumatized by that. So they wrote her off the show. They had her lose a loser leaves WWE match just so that she could take some time off. She's back now. So they never
should have done a stalker angle. We should have had,
they've done it before.
The wrestler
so well.
stalk her and
yeah, exactly.
Life imitates art, imitates life.
Yeah, next time she comes out, mysterious music hits and she looks, oh, it's the surprise return of the stalker. Could happen. I mean, they basically did that gimmick with DDP and Undertaker. So.
Right. The reason I think it's funny is because it's not beneath him. It's just that he hasn't thought of it. Exactly. That's the only reason he hasn't done it.
Yeah. By the way, I always wish they would do one of those, like, This Is Your Life segments, but for real. Like, actually, like, the wrestler doesn't know what's going to happen. Like, they have The Rock come out, and then they're like, this is your actual high school girlfriend and your actual elementary school teacher, and have them say real things that they don't like about him or whatever. I mean, I think Mankind could have been a 4-time world champion if that happened. But, by the way, did you see the segment with Bayley and Alexa Bliss, This Is Your Life one?
No.
Oh.
No.
Missing out. It's considered, like, the worst wrestling segment in modern history by a lot of people now.
Oh, wow. I will check it out then for sure.
Yeah, it's I don't even know if it's worth watching though, because it's basically just, like, debilitating cringe. Like, Alexa Bliss, like, really did try to put her all into that performance and make it because she is good on the mic, she was the only part of that segment that seemed like it was trying to make itself entertaining. But the script she was given was terrible. Bailey's performance as like a good guy at the time was just like so wooden. And I think it was the second time, I'm not sure, but I think it was the second time ever they've done This Is Your Life. And the first time was the highest rated segment, in Raw history. It was done so well. Everybody loves it. So they decided to, we're going to do the Rock and Mick Foley segment, but we're going to do it with Bailey and Alexa Bliss. So this can't go wrong. But it wasn't even really their fault, because then they bring out who's supposed to be, I forget exactly what the bit was, but it was supposed to be like her best friend comes out. They had a couple other people come out too, and it just cut like cringeworthy promos, but her high school boyfriend comes out, and then her friend from middle school or something comes out as well, like, and then they just start like making out in the middle of the ring. And the whole like swerve, I guess, was supposed to be like, Alexa Bliss knew they liked each other or something and orchestrated this to embarrass Bailey, but it didn't really make sense. They didn't really explain that later either, so we just have to infer that that's the case. And it was also just like the crowd was silent. Like they just like start kissing and everybody just goes like you hear like for a second like, oh, and then just everybody's confused. So just everybody's just sitting there in silence. And Bailey's trying to react, but she's not a very good actor either. So she's like trying to be like, oh my God, but she's just like, what? And Alexa Bliss is like trying to be like, ha ha ha, look what I did, but nobody can figure out what she did. So one of the worst things ever.
I will check anything that's the worst.
Yeah,
I will check out.
Yeah,
for sure.
I wouldn't
give the worst.
Oh, I was gonna say that Vince referenced it recently on an episode where he came out and I think he was trying to be like, hey guys, I'm self-aware, and he like was talking about, he's like, oh, the greatest segments. He's like listing like the greatest matches or something, and then he's like, and we've had the gobbledygooker, and we've had Bailey, This Is Your Life. So he's like trying to say these are the bad segments. Ha ha, we're laughing. Vince, you wrote these things. It was not that long ago. It was you who wrote this. You could have just not done it if you knew it was bad. But I don't know. I guess he does write like 5 hours of TV every week, so give him a break maybe.
I guess. How about this? What the fuck's wrong with Jericho?
Oh my God.
Here's a segue for you, right?
So for those of you listening who don't know, I have tried on my podcast to bring up this topic, and my co-host Phil does not want to have any of it. We both love Chris Jericho, but he won't even engage in this discussion. I'm not totally sure why. But Chris Jericho is, I don't think he's ever, well, I don't know. I mean, I would say in his early parts of his career, seemed like a pretty intelligent guy. He was always consistently funny, and he would write his own promos and stuff like that. So we knew he at least was witty or whatever. His podcast for a while was good. He was a good interviewer. He's good at presenting it. He seems like he's a decently smart guy. But then he has ramped up having, over the last few years, conspiracy theorists and what have you on his podcast. And then that's led to, well, I want to hear your take on it, because I've talked, I think, a lot about this in the past.
I mean, just to follow up, you were saying he on his podcast he had Donald Trump Jr. on to promote his ghostwritten book. Recently, he had a QAnon person on, and that's when I went, okay, I love Chris Jericho probably as much as you do. He is, Roddy Piper is my number one all-time favorite, and Chris Jericho is number 2.
Right.
So that's how Mick Foley's number 3 for keeping score at home.
Okay. Yeah. Who's number 4?
I don't have a number 4.
Really? Oh, you got to round it out.
Yeah. You're right. I'll come up with it.
Do you have a number 5?
I do have a number 5, just not a number 4.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I just keep that. I reserve that space because there's got to be somebody.
You reserve that space for when there's somebody you like enough. Yeah. So you only have 3 wrestlers you like. Yeah.
Right. Plus 5. I got number 5.
Right. Oh yeah. 4.
Virgil's probably number 5.
That's fair. That's a good point. Yeah.
Just in the sake of for inclusion, because those are all white guys otherwise.
Otherwise, nobody would include Virgil in anything. Oh,
no. But Chris Jericho is one of these guys like Joe Rogan who I think are very credulous people. Conspiracy theories are interesting. They're fun. They're exciting. They make you think that you know something other people don't know. It's fun. I've been interested in lots of different conspiracy theories over time. But there's been a shift, I think, recently from fun to something quasi-religious and scary and violent. So Jericho and Rogan have this, I keep an open mind idea. But it's not an open mind. It's not knowing when to shut the door. You don't just believe everything. Jericho had the woman who came up with the Mandela effect, and he just bought every bit of it. I mean, it's just so it's so frustrating because you're trying to jump into the conversation and say, well, Chris, just point out this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that really is scary, and never gets below the surface of it. It's all just, well, this is another person's opinion, and it's good to get that out there in the marketplace of ideas, blah, blah, blah. Well, which in theory it is, but he still is curating his program. So by putting Donald Trump Jr. on, he is endorsing him. As much as he can pretend, I'm just giving everybody their own, all sides, he is endorsing him. So that's on him.
Yeah.
But again, and I love to say you separate the art from the artist, he's still my second favorite wrestler. And I think history will probably show that he's one of the best wrestlers of all time as far as how nobody has ever adapted the way he has adapted. He takes some time off, he comes back, whole new character, and it works.
Yeah.
And he really works on these characters. I mean, I think he's probably one of the smartest wrestlers out there. I can forget all this stuff. But recently we found out that his wife, in fact, stormed the Capitol building on January 6th.
Yeah.
And she posted photos to her Instagram. That takes it beyond a little bit because it's hard for me to picture a married couple where one of them thinks storming the Capitol is a good idea and one of them, you can't really be neutral.
Yeah.
Is what I'm trying to say. So I think that he probably feels that way too, but is savvy enough to know that it would really, really hurt his brand. So, he tiptoes around it. He'll have a QAnon person on his show and kind of, it's all kind of lighthearted and whatever, but he's smart enough to know.
Yeah.
Not to alienate people.
I mean, that's true, but yeah, it's like with Joe Rogan, at least Joe Rogan tries his best to have a balance of people on the left and on the right on his show so he can claim that he's, just showing both sides and giving people the ability to voice their issues or whatever, but he definitely has more right-wing people on his show than left-wing. But, he had Bernie Sanders on his show. He advocates for issues that are more sensical, I guess. Is that the opposite of nonsensical? I don't know.
It should be.
Yeah. So Joe Rogan I would give more credit than, well, I don't know. Actually, I was going to say that, but Joe Rogan has recently been promoting conspiracy about COVID being fake that are his personal opinion, not having people on the show to say that, but saying it himself. And he's been pushing some weird semi-homophobic and transphobic stuff just out of nowhere. Like, it just comes out of absolutely nowhere. And he's also been pushing, like, what's the other one? The cancel culture thing. Like, he believes that he's on the side of the people, the right-wingers who think that they're being silenced. And the same right-wingers who are on his show, the #1 podcast in the world, being silenced.
The conservatives who are screaming on every single media outlet that they're being silenced. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. They must be. I can't hear what they're saying, so I don't know. But but like Joe Rogan's is different because he at least has an air of a balance of his guests. And Jericho basically has he's either having wrestlers or like heavy metal band members on his show, or he's having QAnon conspiracy theorists. That's it. Maybe he'll have somebody in the middle who is just some random like Bigfoot conspiracy theorist or something. But when he has anything to do with politics, it's exclusively right-wing QAnon stuff. So it's not a surprise to me that his wife, in fact, was at the Capitol. She claims that she did not go anywhere near the building, but I don't know. I mean, they were all pretty close to the building. And
she was still, even if that's true, she was still there for a Stop the Steal rally.
Yes.
Which we know is bullshit.
Right.
So even if she still did that. So
yeah. And to be passionate enough to, she also lives in Florida, so she flew out there. So to be passionate enough to listen to, to believe, one, that the election is stolen, which really you just have to be stupid. I mean, you could be stupid and believe that. But to then take that and turn it into action and commitment and fly to the Capitol building, there's no chance she didn't at least want to get very, very close to the building, if not inside, if she flew all the way there. I don't think she was standing a mile away like she claims she was and just going, yeah, cool, or whatever. That was a very obvious, and I'm surprised that, I think you're right, that Jericho wouldn't ever be public about what he probably actually believes, because, it would take away a huge part of his fan base. I would hope, at least. But I'm surprised that he allowed, not that he should be controlling what his wife does, but like, I'm surprised he allowed that to happen. Like, those pictures got very publicly shared on her public Instagram, and I think it's not. Actually, that's the weird thing, though. Her Instagram account is private. You have to follow her to see her post. She has to accept you. But then she not only posted it on there, but then she made it her profile picture, so you can see it if you go to her thing without following her. So it's just there. Okay, yeah. She's got a hat that says Trump right there, so I don't know. But
she ain't the smartest one, but that's...
No, it's okay. They deserve each other, apparently. So I'm disappointed. And, you said Jericho's your number 2 all time, and me and Phil both have him as our number 1 of all time. Chris Jericho's, in a lot of ways what made me really... I think it's Jericho and Edge, pretty much, who made me really care a lot about wrestling and, get into specifically their, catalog of wrestling. So it's very disappointing to me. I would never have expected... I think in the early days when Trump was first running, he was sort of subtly denouncing him. He was saying things that seemed like everybody was kind of saying at the time, things that seemed subtly like, hey, maybe they were just Biden-esque, we need more unity or whatever. But he was saying things like, hey, we got a really divisive political climate right now. A lot of people are spreading lies. So it seemed like he was talking about Trump. Now I realize he was probably talking about the Democrats. So I don't know. Yeah. I figured he was probably a liberal. I figured he was probably not exactly a socialist like I might like, but I did not think he was the right wing. He just seems too smart for that based on his wrestling catalog and based on the way he writes his storylines.
Yeah.
But,
to give him the benefit of the doubt, it's possible that his wife is a complete lunatic.
Right.
And he's a little bit of a lunatic.
Right.
Maybe he believes some of this stuff, but doesn't feel passionate about it.
Yeah.
I think that if a person is subjected to Fox News 24/7, they will have a skewed version of reality. Mm-hmm. And that's not to excuse them because anybody can change the channel, but it really is propaganda. And, there was a movie I mentioned on my podcast called The Brainwashing of My Dad, which is a woman chronicled. Her dad was basically a Kennedy liberal, Kennedy Democrat. And once he started watching Fox News, she just noticed this gradual, his attitudes were changing. The things he would say were changing. She started documenting, and over the course of a year, he changed into one of these Fox people. Yeah, and you can watch it develop.
Mm-hmm.
We're only, any of us, we're all subject to our own senses. So your political views or your ethics or whatever are created by your observations and how you process information. And if you're given complete lies, and only those lies, you kind of can't be expected to not believe them because they're not really lies. If that's what brainwashing is.
Yeah.
It works. They wouldn't have a word for it if it didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be it can be like an addiction in a way where it's like if you see it once and they give you the specific narrative, you're probably going to tune in. If you feel like tuning in a second time, then you're probably hooked for a very long time and you're not going to get out of it because their narrative is very specific. It's very much like what you see on the other stations is a lie. And so we tell you the truth. These are things that are happening specifically that people are not talking about. So the fact that we're talking about them must mean we're saying something unique. And then they'll start to listen to, watch Fox casually or whatever. And this may be a whole other topic, but it's weird to me how it's like Fox very much raised their viewers to leave the nest in a way that I don't think they ever expected, where now their viewers are not even, a lot of them are not even liking Fox and are going on to, Newsmax and OAN and stuff like that because Fox is too liberal for them or whatever. And I think that seemed like that was in the DNA of Fox from the beginning, because people like Tucker Carlson, who will go on there and will just be like, I don't know what the liberals are trying to do, but it's very clear that they're trying to do something. And this is a thing that is close to what maybe they're trying to do. Hey, remember when Hitler said this thing that was specifically similar to something that Joe Biden said or whatever? So it's he's always been edging them towards even further radical than Fox. So it should be no surprise to them that their viewers don't even think Fox is as trustworthy as other sources now. Yeah. In a lot of ways, Fox created QAnon from the ground up because not just because of the politics they've created, but because they've created a completely fictionalized narrative of the world that really, some people who were just complete loonies probably have believed this for decades before Fox was even super conservative, in some way or another have believed it. But Fox created it and said, this is actually the way the world is and always has been. And boom, this is the thing. And I guess it's just good that there aren't more, more non-Foxes than there are Foxes, that the rest of the stations, while they're obviously very flawed, are edge more liberal and towards truth way more so than Fox does. So it's good that it's not like there's a split of a whole bunch of conservative stations and a whole bunch of, not. Because it would be worse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as bad as Jericho's views might be, I would still say that your generation of wrestlers, of which I guess Jericho's kind of in between us, our generations. He's not yours or mine, but I mean the people that, Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan and those people like that, because of where they came from and the time they came from, you'd be probably really hard pressed to find any one of those guys who isn't racist or homophobic. Really, honestly.
Yeah.
People growing up in Georgia, really, Ric Flair, just because he's never been caught on mic saying anything, the guy grew up that way.
I'm pretty sure Ric Flair was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's, by the way, been reported in the last few years that Ric Flair was overheard saying the N-word in the locker room.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So there's that, and I'm sure that it exists.
Doesn't surprise me. Yeah. It would surprise me more if he hadn't.
Right.
It really would. No, and just because that's the way it is, and not like I'm not excusing people from a different generation. I'm just saying I would rather hang out with a random selection of today's wrestlers than I would a random selection of those wrestlers.
100%. Yeah.
Just because of that. I think even love Piper because of where and when he was raised. He probably was raised with racist views. He probably was. Or homophobic, or both, or misogynist, or
definitely
all.
homophobic if you've heard his promos.
Yeah, sure. But and maybe he grew out of that in adulthood. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. But somebody in Jericho's generation, it's a little harder to see. Yeah. Rogan had a program, went one season. Joe Rogan explains everything,
right? Or
what I call Joe Rogan falls for everything, because one episode was about Bigfoot, one was about whatever, and just completely uncritical. Completely uncritical, and I'm having an open mind. That's the way they frame it, but you got to close part of that mind so that the stuff stops going right through it.
Right. Even the older generation, I think most people, maybe it's just me, but it seemed like you could not really totally tell anybody's political views completely, most people's political views completely, until Trump, became popular, where everybody, you could totally see what side of the fence they were on. When Jerry Lawler said on election day that he was voting for Trump, Tatanka, I saw all these people posting that they're voting for Trump, and I was like, it shocked me at the time, but now that I think about it, it's I guess that whole era, you got Hulk Hogan saying the N-word, you have Ric Flair probably, you have, I even watched a thing with an interview with DDP recently where he says he voted for Brian Kemp in Georgia. So clearly, I thought DDP he's got the whole yoga thing, he's saving people's literal lives, that he was maybe a moral person, but no. And for the record, he opposes Kemp now because Kemp opened Georgia too early. That's his point of contention, not the rest of the stuff. But yeah, I think today's generation is better in so many ways, not just politically, but I feel like they just seem way more human than the old wrestlers did. That the whole thing that Undertaker and Goldberg were saying about modern wrestlers being soft and playing video games in the locker room instead of, I don't know what, snorting coke. What do they want them to do? Yeah. But I think that cemented for me that I like today's generation of wrestlers better because they're just regular people. Maybe because they're closer to my age, but they seem a lot more like just kids who grew up watching wrestling, like myself, and who decided this is what I want to do as a career, and I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to make it an art form, and I'm going to help my friends succeed as well. And I'm not going to be just an asshole because I can be an asshole and try to kill any 17-year-old who comes in faking a wrestling license. So I think while yesterday's wrestlers raised me on wrestling, today's wrestlers are what wrestling should be closer to. I guess the other point I want to make too is that wrestling as an art form is, when it's good, it's the greatest thing. I could not imagine watching it. Like I said earlier, I can watch a 3-hour Raw and not a 3 hours binge watching a drama series. When it's good, it's my favorite thing, the greatest thing. And when it's bad, it's especially bad for TV and for you, Bailey, this is your life and these things. It's laughably bad. I remember showing I think it's different for people who are outside of wrestling and who haven't watched it before. I showed my friends this clip recently, but they actually showed it to me. They were like, I saw this GIF. Can you explain the context behind this from wrestling? It was Vince blowing up in his limo. He closes the door and the limo blows up.
Oh, yeah.
And they were confused by it. So they watched they pulled up the full segment on their phone, and they're trying to get me to explain it, I guess. And I just had to sit there and realize, to a lot of people, this is totally inaccessible because the way that they were laughing at the way Vince was walking down the hall, which actually, granted, is pretty funny because he does the thing. But
he does that, yeah.
Yeah, but he's literally just walking, and he looked scared because I think the idea was that somebody was threatening to kill him, and then they ended up actually killing him when the limo blew up, right? I think that was the storyline.
Right.
So he's walking, he's looking over his shoulder, And they were just laughing at that. So I think the idea of wrestling for some people as a whole is a laughable concept even now. But when it's good, there is nothing else like it. And I think a lot of the times these days it's very, very good.
Well, people are conditioned to laugh at wrestling for starters. So, I mean, and that's just kind of always, they're always going to consider it a lower form of entertainment.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you take something like that out of context, it's probably hard to explain. That was jettisoned, right, when Benoit killed his family, allegedly.
Yeah, I guess allegedly. Yeah. Phil still thinks he was murdered. I've never gotten that, but did you hear yesterday what the?
No wonder he doesn't want to talk about Jericho.
Yeah, at the trivia, I asked him. I was like, "This is a trivia question, but I only want Phil to answer it." And I said, "Was Chris Benoit murdered?" And he like pauses for a second. He's like, "Should I actually try to get the point here?" And he just goes, "Yes." And I'm like, "Yep, no point," and move on. So he couldn't even do that.
Sorry, that's incorrect. It was a murder-suicide. It's murder-suicide.
Yeah, he in fact did kill his family and himself. You were wrong. And then I asked him who won the Elimination Chamber match last week because he was so pissed off about Orton losing, just to rub it in.
Oh.
So, yeah, so Benoit, I think Benoit did a lot of, I don't know, it's a complicated scenario because I think he did a lot of good for, I can't end that sentence well at all. There's no way to end that sentence well. He did good for what? His family? He did good for who?
Well, look at it this way.
Yeah.
As much trouble as you and I are having with Jericho, at least Chris Benoit wasn't our favorite wrestler when that happened. I mean, can you imagine? And in all seriousness, that must have really hurt some people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Obviously, it hurt people. You know, I'm not.
His wife and kid.
Hurt some more than others, obviously.
Right.
But still, I mean, if you really had your emotions wrapped up in this person, then he did that. If Jericho killed his family right now,
right,
I probably would reevaluate a lot of things I think about him.
Yeah.
I can separate the art from the artist up to a point, but I mean, I was never attached to Benoit, so I can take him or leave him. It doesn't hurt me to watch a match. I don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, before we wrap things up, how about a quick F, marry, kill? Not to be confused with F, Murray, Abraham.
Right.
Different game
Totally.
entirely. Okay, here you go. You ready for this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
F, marry, kill, D-Generation X. The original one.
Oh.
We're talking Triple H, you got Shawn Michaels, and you got China.
Okay, this is tough. Okay.
I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the easy marry. All right, this is gonna sound. All right. I would marry Triple H because I think that he has a lot more longevity as a personality and a person. You had Shawn Michaels in the old days being a total asshole. These days, just a Jesus freak. So either generation of Shawn Michaels is great to watch on TV, but I wouldn't want to be around him for very long. So I'm going to go marry Triple H, and this might shock you. Fuck Shawn Michaels. And I would kill Chyna because, she is the dead one out of the three, so it'd be easy. But on top of that, I just, I mean, I hate to say it, but it is in fact Chyna, is it not?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go with you because, I mean, pragmatically speaking, Chyna is already dead, so you wouldn't have to kill her again.
It's true.
Right?
Yep.
But you're obviously going to have to F a dude, so.
Mm-hmm. But if I had to, it would be Shawn Michaels, I must say.
Well, I agree with you. I would go with marrying Triple H because you got that money.
Yeah. That's true,
so when you
too.
divorce him, you got the money. Shawn, you're going to be stuck effing a dude.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, no matter how this one shapes up, but that's probably how I would do it.
No matter which of the three.
But now, if Chyna were still alive, it would complicate things.
Would it complicate things?
That's kind of an easy out.
That's true, but I don't know. It depends on which era of Chyna. If it was Chyna like right before she died versus Chyna in the 90s. Chyna in the 90s, I would reevaluate. Chyna right before she died, I think would not warrant being in the other two categories.
All right. Well, from my perspective, and not to go all homophobic, but if I had to choose between Chyna and one of those two dudes, it's probably going to be Chyna.
Wow. All right.
Probably going to be Chyna.
All right.
I mean, provided she's alive.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
So, but again, not to be homophobic. I'm sure they're wonderful gentlemen. I'm sure they would treat me like a gentleman would.
Right.
But,
yeah. Is it homophobic to say that you wouldn't have sex with a man? I don't think that's a thing.
I think there's somebody who feels that way. I know that there are people who believe that if you say you don't want to have sex with a trans person, it makes you transphobic.
Right.
So It's not much of a stretch, is it?
Regardless, I would still pick Shawn Michaels over China, and that's my final verdict.
He's kind of handsome.
Yeah.
You mean with the hair, though, right? Before the ball.
100%. Without the hair, it's no contest because that is not a look.
All right.
And with the
so
eye is another issue.
Let me just recap.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you wouldn't fuck Shawn Michaels,
right,
unless he had long hair.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
And if he wore a China mask, then that would complicate things even further, you know. But I don't even know what that means. I just said it. I would say, because it's tough though, because for most of his career he didn't even really have that much hair anyway. His hairline was receding from like 96 and just kept going back, you know, until it was just gone. So yeah, and of course his eye also kept getting worse. He always had something weird with his eye, but then he got smashed into the Jericho, and now it's just like hanging out of his head. So
I didn't know it. So he has like a lazy eye or something? I didn't notice.
Very lazy, yeah. It's it like dangles like down here kind of, and it's also like it looks like a perpetual black eye. Like it's just kind of a little bit darker than the other one. So his strategy is he wears the cowboy hat to the ring and he pulls it down a little bit so that it looks like there's a shadow on his eye instead of just a fucked up eye.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to go along with his lazy work ethic.
Yeah, exactly. But the best thing that Jericho ever did, or the worst thing Jericho ever did was not having Donald Trump Jr. on his podcast. It was breaking Shawn Michaels' beautiful face. That's my hot take.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That is actually what happened, I think. I think that's what messed up his eye, was that he threw him into the thing, the Jericho TV.
Oh, wow.
Which seems like it would be something that Shawn would be more like upset about now, but
yeah. Was this after he retired and came back, or
it was like 08 when they feuded. Like they feuded in like 08 for a while. They had that. It was a pretty great feud. And then actually right after that, Jericho they did an angle where Jericho was supposed to accidentally punch Shawn's wife, but then he accidentally did it for real and actually punched her in the face and swelled up her face. So Jericho basically just like injured both of them within a short span of time, and I don't know. It's not a good ratio there.
All right. Well, I guess it's time to wrap up our show. Jack, you got any? Tell us your social media.
Well, you know, I do have some social media. I have an Instagram. It's Fightgeist Wrestling. I have a Twitter. It's FightgeistPod. I have an email account. I don't know if you heard of that, but fightgeistwrestling@gmail.com. If you want to give us feedback on the show. But more importantly than any of that, I have a Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/FightgeistWrestling. And every single week, on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we stream our episodes of the show Fightgeist, the alternative wrestling podcast, myself, my co-host Phil, and those episodes go up on YouTube with high definition video versions, and on all podcast platforms, wherever you find your podcast, they're there. We are about to hit our 1-year anniversary doing Fightgeist, and there's such a huge back archive of content. If you like wrestling content, if you like this episode, then I think Fightgeist is perfect. But, Dad, I know you have a show too, so why don't you plug yours?
Well, thank you, Jack. I do a podcast with my lovely co-host, Mary. It's called Let's Not Get Into It, and it's not at all about wrestling, but you might like it anyway. Basically, just a conversation about current events and whatnot, and it's every week on YouTube and Spotify and everywhere that cool podcasts can be found. Again, it's Let's Not Get Into It.
Let's Not Get Into It. And you know, if you came here from Fightgeist, if you're hearing this because you're a fan of my show, then I've got a challenge for you, because you said they don't talk about wrestling. I know for a fact, because I've listened to this show, they've mentioned wrestling before at some point. And so here's the challenge. You got to listen to all the episodes, and you got to find the times when they've mentioned wrestling, and then report back, okay? Let me know.
God bless Samson.
Who is he, Papa?
That's his secret. I don't think you'll ever know. But I'll say this, my dear. In this age where there are certain evil men who propose to destroy us, Samson is an example to men of goodwill who serve justice.
Back when I was a kid, life was going swell, till something happened, blew everything to hell. That night my daddy stumbled in, all pale and weak, set a woman up the block, just gave birth to a geek. Mom said, sell it to the circus. What the heck? Dad said, nope, this one's a pencil neck. And if there's one thing lower than a sideshow freak, it's a gritty, scum-sucking pencil neck geek. You see, if you take a pencil that won't hold lead, looks like a pipe cleaner attached to a head, add a buggy whip body with a brain that leaks, you got yourself a grit-eating pencil neck geek. Pencil neck geek, grit-eating freak, scum-sucking pea-head with a lousy physique. He's a one-man, no-cut, losing streak. Nothing but a pencil neck geek. Pencil neck geek. Soon the geeks were popping up all over town. You couldn't hardly sneeze without knocking one down. After a nice juicy steak, if you need a toothpick, just reach for a geek. They'll do the trick. One day we cut one up for fish bait. Learned our lesson just a little bit late. Soon as the geek hit the drink, the water turned red. Next day, sure enough, all the fish were dead. Pencil neck geek, grit-eating freak, scum-sucking pea-head with a lousy physique. He's a one-man, no-gut, losing streak. Nothing but a pencil neck geek. Most any night, you know where I can be found. Yeah, stomping some geek's head into the ground. So keep the faith, cause in Blassie you can trust. I won't give up till the last geek bites the dust. Pencil neck geek, grit-eating freak, scum-sucking pea-head with a lousy physique. He's a one-man, no-gut, losing streak. Nothing but a pencil neck geek. They say these geeks come a dime a dozen. I'm looking for the guy who's supplying the dimes. It's gonna be real hard times for all of these grit-eating, scum-sucking, boot-licking, drop-kicking, gut-grinding, nail-biting, glue-sniffing, scab-picking, butt-scratching, egg-hatching, sleazy, smelly, pepper-bellied, dirty, lousy, rotten, stinking freaks. Nothing but a pencil neck geek.